Excellent. Our even recordings are there, I swear. Right, hello and good, good afternoon and welcome to a little talk on the language of disability. I have to say that I have tried to condense this down to 20 minutes, but normally I talk about it for about an hour, so I'm gonna try and give you a whistle tops tour.
Michael,
So,
don't worry. Take your time because with
yeah,
fewer people to introduce themselves at the beginning, you've got lots more time. So
I have oh
you go
brilliant,
for
right.
it.
So here we
When we
go.
get to 7 o'clock, I'll stop you.
No, that's all right. No, I won't do that long. So usually I do want to say that there are no silly questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat box or to ask me at the end, or even ask me like via my LinkedIn. I know that some of you are already connections, so feel free just to ping me a question or two if you need to. Also, be when we talk about this subject, it's important to be mindful of others in our little e-room, because some of you may have more experience than others. So I just thought I'd say that. So some of you already know me. So I won't talk for too long. I'm basically 42. I'm a wheelchair user, and I'm part of the 5 to 8%, and that is only 5 to 8% of the disabled people are actually wheelchair users. The rest of us have either got hidden impairments or other kind of impairments. So the reason why I launched my business, which is called Comment Disabled, because last year I went viral and I then got to train the restaurant chain in question, and then on the back of that I've gained some other contracts. So I've recently been to Wales to do some training there, and I've also yesterday got a contract to train to the air solicitors firm in London. So, and on Friday I've been interviewed by ITV again. So there we go. So yeah, so that is why I'm where I am, and that is the famous video. Sorted. So today we're going to look at talk about the way we look at disability, and also mainly can be focusing on the language of disability. So there are three main models of disability. They are the charity model, the medical model, and the social model. And I'm just quickly gonna usually I talk about this for a long time, but we're going to talk about all three because they do feed into how people view disability. So the charity model is, well, what it says on the actual tin. It can view people or sell people as needing charity or needing pity. I don't get wrong, there are some good charities out there, but disabled people, me included, always say that we don't always need charity. We just need to be treated equally. I don't know, for example, if any of you are old enough, but but there was a famous ITV used to have a telephone every year, and where they raise money. And one year it was about all around disability. It was around the late 80s, and disabled people actually stormed the ITV building and stopped the actual program live on TV because they were saying that we didn't really want charity, we just wanted to be treated equally. And that is why ITV don't do telethons anymore. True story. You also have the medical model of disability, which was around in the late 80s, which mainly views the impairment as the problem, and they will either try and cure you or just give you some sort of prosthetics. And around the late 80s, early 90s, there was a group of 4 wheelchair users in Canada, and they kind of were in a pub, and they were sat there and they were thinking, you know what, we don't really like this medical model or the social model. We're going to invent our own model. And they invented the social model, and the social model said that it's society's problem that things are not accessible. It isn't the actual person's problem. So, yeah, for example, like just to use a basic analogy, if the stairs are a problem, then maybe a ramp should be built. So all of that does have a tedious link to language, which is what we'll move on to in a minute. So terminology. The first rule of what I always say to people of terminology club is just to use the actual person's name regarding of their impairment. Just be your usual professional selves, worry not about using inappropriate terminology. I find that as a salesperson, like when I go to somewhere, I can tell straight away if somebody is, shall we just say, a bit nervous for whatever reason. But sometimes it might be just because they've not seen that impairment before. And therefore, because they are so nervous about saying the actual wrong thing, it actually means that they probably will say the wrong thing. So I always say to like, I'll train Prezo and visit Pembrokeshire, and I always say to like just be your usual selves, really. Most of the language around disability is definitely outdated, as we'll talk about in a minute. Some of it is downright offensive, but it's important to note that although you might not be an expert, not all the time am I as a disabled person, and we'll get onto that in a minute. There are some parts of language that even disabled people can get a bit wrong sometimes. And I keep saying, just be your usual genuine and kind selves, really. I don't know what it's flashing for. There we go. Right. The basics. So you have to remember that words have power. That's what I always say to people, is that words have power, and those words will stay with you forever. And then what I always say to people, that although like if you do make a mistake, like that mistake will stay with you for a long time. So it's important to know, I always say to companies, it's important to know what you're talking about. So here are some general guidelines. Always person first, as I was saying to you in the first slide. Avoid referring to an individual by their condition or their impairment. Now that might sound really, really, really obvious. However, the number of times that I've been to a hospitality sector or a hotel, and I know I'm like checking in, and they go, you're the man in the wheelchair, aren't you? No, obviously I am, but I'm much more than a man in a wheelchair. I'm just a normal customer. I wouldn't refer to you as a customer with glasses. You're just a customer, and then that will then stay with me forever. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't go back. So for me, I'm just a wheelchair user. I'm definitely not wheelchair bound. Me and my wheelchair, we have a very working relationship. Particularly when I trash it, it shouldn't really, though I'm not definitely not bound to it. I just use it. So don't call a wheelchair user a wheelchair. A number of times I get on a train and the ramp man puts the ramp down and he shouts out, a wheelchair coming through, wheelchair coming through. I'm like, oh no, because then, but I'm more than just a wheelchair. I wouldn't call him a notebook and pen, although I probably would if I'm a bit angry. So also the words the disabled does offend because the word "alert" is dehumanizing. It's kind of like grouping people together, isn't it? So it's like, I know I see the three people with glasses on in this room, so if I group you all in together and you all together and just call you the glasses, you might not be too happy about it. So they just avoid you using the word no, and try using this disabled person, right, or person with a physical impairment or learning impairment is a lot more factual, and it is what it is. I personally just like to be called a disabled person, only because I'm not with anything, but that's my own personal choice. Although I'm not bothered if you do refer to me as with a with a mobility impairment, but I do prefer disabled person. So I've got this little chart that I love, or table that I love to use, and so it's just basically yes or no. And I know that some companies that I've trained have even printed this out and put it on their put it somewhere in their office, just to remind people really. And some of you may think it's a bit obvious, but you'll be surprised in life. So I'm just gonna say right now, like yes and no. So yes to disabled people, no to the disabled. Yes to disabled, because it is what it is. You are disabled. No to triple spastic, handicapped, invalid, or anything like that. And I'll get onto in a minute why those words are not particularly great and the actual history of them, particularly the word triple. But the word triple is actually used quite a lot in our kind of media now. So like you got Trip Nation on Netflix, and you've got TripAdvisor on Channel 4. So that sadly that word is becoming more and more into daily life. And although I understand this is only my own personal view, other views are available. The word still people say the word triple is okay because they own it, so they can call another disabled people person a triple, but they wouldn't like it if a non-disabled person called them it. Then I'm like, well, in that case, then just don't say it, really. But that's only my own personal opinion. So that is why I say no. And in a minute, you'll see the history of that and the actual word, and then hopefully you'll understand why it's not that great. Yes, to having has the impairment name that I have cerebral palsy, but I definitely don't suffer from it. I'm definitely not a victim of it either. I'll just have it. That's it. Like just like you have glasses, or you have a headache, or you have it is what it is. This is the most not controversial, but it does raise a few eyebrows. So here we go. So non-disabled and definitely no to able-bodied, normal or healthy. So the way and able-bodied is used quite a lot, and the reason why I don't like the word able-bodied is because it implies that somebody who isn't disabled is more able than me, and that might not be the actual case. But it is accurate that they're not disabled, but that is true. So therefore, you're just non-disabled, or you're not disabled, but you're not able-bodied, because I just think that's that just implies quite a lot. Learning difficulties / disability, that is true. That's the factual statement, but you're not, hopefully not going to use the words mentally handicapped or retarded. I've done wheelchair bound and wheelchair user and wheelchair bound, and then just simply you got like deaf and hearing impaired, but not the deaf, blind, visually impaired, not the blind, and finally having restricted growth, or as I heard Ellie Simmons, who's the famous Paralympian, saying that they shouldn't mind being called a person with small stature, but not a dwarf and not a midget, because people who have that do find that very offensive. So you've got a little table there which I can send to Matthew afterwards, and he can distribute it if you want it as a kind of. I know you might think it is very, very obvious, but you'll be surprised. So let's move on to the history of some of the words. Yeah, I like this. So the word cripple originates from the word creep, and then also relates to where disabled people are allowed to bake. Handicap, which I know is still used in America, and I caught it being used in a bit of NHS promotion the other day, which I did tell them about. Anyway, this word roots back to the Second World War, where you used to have to go cap in hand for your benefits, and that also relates to begging. And finally, invalid relates to the validity of wants and views of an individual. However, what I do say is, like, particularly with the last word, invalid, that is still quite popular with the older generation. I was at a meeting even last week, and the lady there was in her late 70s, and she touched my arm and she asked me how long had I been an invalid for, which I didn't really feel like I shouldn't really correct her in a public forum, but I should have done really. But that just like but I shouldn't mean it in an offensive way. She just meant it as a she just wanted to know really. So I think it also depends on like how you use language as well. But I wouldn't expect anybody who's, shall just say, younger to use words like this. I see them in the chat, and I will come back to that in a minute. So that is the end of the brief kind of whistle top tour. But I did build in some time for some questions that I'm more than happy to take. And I see one in the, or is it a chat, or is it a question or a statement? So yeah. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.